Joining us now to talk about the federal budget and the one big beautiful bill is none other than Congressman Rich McCormick from my home state of Georgia. Congressman McCormick, and I hope you don't mind me saying my friend, welcome to the show.
Thanks, my friend. It's good to be with you today. I'm excited about prospects of getting something done that's going to actually benefit the American people, something that's going to be new, fresh, and innovative for politics. I think especially once the Senate gets done with it. I'm excited.
Well, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. And you are someone, and I'm not saying this to butter you up. I mean, I'm not seeking a political favor. I don't know what it would be, but you're an extraordinary person. You served in the military. You served as a physician in the military. You've been a trauma room physician. You've got, I believe, two lovely daughters and have had a wonderful career. And now you're a United States congressman. And you had to fight to get that seat. And I'm really proud of the job that you've done. So we passed the one big, beautiful bill. And by just the skin of our teeth, I think it passed by one vote in the House. Is that right?
That's right. We had, I believe, I can't remember if it was Chip Roy or somebody else that abstained. Actually, it was Andy Harris, the head of the Freedom Caucus, who abstained. And for idealistic reasons, he's a good guy. He's also a physician. He's a conservative that didn't think we did enough and didn't want to tank the bill, though, because he knew that if we tank the bill, then we're going to let good become the enemy of great. And it doesn't save enough, quite frankly. It doesn't for those of us who are fiscal conservatives. As a matter of fact, next year we'll increase our debt by another $415 billion, in large part due to the SALT. The SALT increase is a $385 billion extra dollars going to be tacked onto that, which basically makes us go further in debt. And as you know, we're really in trouble right now. This is going to come back to us in spades. Our kids are going to be paying for this. So he abstained. We were able to pass it. The good news is, and I just scared everybody with that big number that I just basically said, we're approaching $500 billion more in spending, not less, more. But I think the Senate's going to be able to strip out the SALT and actually get rid of some of the IRA provisions that were passed during the Biden administration. And we'll get back to something that at least is deficit neutral, which we haven't done in a very long time. Remember that every year the quote-unquote mandatory spending, or what we call non-discretionary spending, increases automatically. So that's what really kills us. And between Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, if we don't get something under control, we're going to lose it. We're not voting to cut it. We're voting it to save it. And Social Security and Medicare will both go bankrupt in the next presidency. Not this one. Next one, you'll have automatic cuts of 21 and 11% respectively. And we're in trouble if we don't do something about it right now.
Where does the impetus for all of the irrational, irresponsible spending come from? I thought that when Trump got back in office, especially with the talent that he's assembled from Bessent at the Treasury and the Secretary of Commerce, who actually said, Mr. President, let's balance the budget. We're a long ways from balancing the budget. Where does the impetus for this irrational spending come from? I mean, it feels like there is a puppet master that's pulling the strings that cannot be reined in.
Well, most of it is habit, quite frankly. This started during the Bush era, George W. Bush, 2004, when we increased massive spending in Medicare. Once again, good cause, but there's always a good cause. And here's a little dirty little secret. This is what the Democrats do to us. They always have a good thing to spend on, free health care, right? We need to increase Medicare. We need to increase Medicaid, all things for poor people. And it sounds great until, like Margaret Thatcher said, until you run out of other people's money. And the truth is, if you gave everything the Democrats wanted this year for spending, next year they come back with something else, because they always have to have something to promise to people to buy their votes with your money. That's the way they do it. And for any of those in my party who think that you're going to out-left the left, and I know there's a bunch of moderates out there, and God love you, I need you for the majority, but if you try to out-left the left, you'll never do it. If your vote is contingent on being left enough to stay in office, you're not going to stay in office. That comes across as disingenuous. It comes across as tax and spend. And that's why we've gotten in this habit of spending too much, because we try to buy other people's votes. And quite frankly, in President Trump's first term, we did a poor job of controlling this. We're in a bad muscle memory habit of spending money. And it doesn't matter who you are. If you're in Congress, you always want to do people favors, and it's got to stop. This is for the good of the nation now. It means you got to tighten your belt. And I'll say one more caveat, too. Elon Musk, who I respect very, very much, when he was out at Jackson Hole at a group meeting before he was into politics, was asked, what can the Republican Party do better? And he said, I feel a little uncomfortable because I'm not a Republican, but if I was to be honest, I think you guys could come across as more compassionate. In other words, when you cut people's jobs, when you do the things you got to do in order to save programs, you don't celebrate it. Now, ironically, it was Elon that had the golden chainsaw, and I told him, I said, look, this is a necessary thing. I'm glad you're doing it, but if we celebrate it when veterans and Republicans and Democrats are all being cut from their jobs, it's not going to be palatable. So we just have to be careful. As my attitude is make sure that we're doing it in a way that's palatable. That's the magic of Reagan, is that when you're doing the right thing, you still got to realize that it's going to cause some suffering, but we got to get it done for the American people.
Well, I liked what George W. Bush said, or George Herbert Walker Bush. I was not a huge fan. That's a whole different conversation. But he said we needed a kinder, more gentler nation. And I agree with him. And I don't really see anyone who has taken the position of Martin Luther King on in a white person or a black person or a brown person, any person who has become a uniter and someone who can help bridge the divide. But, the Democrats, they lie to the American people. When you talk about cutting veterans and other people's jobs, they weren't really cutting jobs from people who were coming to work. They were cutting jobs from people who wouldn't respond to an email saying, what did you do last week? And they acted like it was some sort of an invasive, horrible thing to demand of someone to say, what did you do? I mean, I've had to answer to somebody, what did I do last week? Virtually my entire life, if not to my boss, to my employees. And so I think we all have to have accountability. What's the matter with having people being accountable who take a paycheck from the federal government? And it's
and let's have an honest conversation with this, because I had Doug Collins came in and talked to the Doctors Caucus. And he said, look, some people who are good, who show up to work, are going to lose their jobs because we don't need those jobs. The government's way too big. Now, it doesn't. Once again, there are a lot of people who don't do a good job. Everybody has horror stories of government workers who don't care. They're just there to collect a paycheck. But there's some good people that we just don't have room for anymore. And we are so bloated, and we've expanded government so large. And this includes the military, by the way. Remember, Hegseth is going to trim, I think, 10% of the officer corps from the Army, as well as some of the other services, just because we're too bloated, too top-heavy, which means some good people are going to lose their job. But that is necessary. We can't sugarcoat it. We just got to say, look, we're going to find other ways to provide jobs, because when you have a great economy, and I think President Trump's doing all the right things for the economy, when you have a great economy, there's going to be plenty of jobs that aren't government jobs, that don't come out of your pocket, but come out of a company that's actually profitable and growing and has benefited from the policies of our government, not created because the size of the government. And that's the difference. And we have to be honest about that conversation, that, there's a little transition pain, but in the long run, we're going to be much better off. We're not going to be reliant on a government job that has no future, that has no ceiling, or has too much of a ceiling, I should say, because there's no upward mobility. This is good for everybody when we get back to privateering and capitalism, because it's what has made America the greatest country in the entire world.
So, Tyler, if you would, please get that clip ready for Rand Paul. I want to play it for Congressman McCormick and our listeners. But you all had a real dogfight to get this across the line in the House. And as I've watched the Sunday morning shows and read the newspapers and the Wall Street Journal, it sounds to me like we may be in for a really rough road in the Senate. And this is what Rand Paul just had to say about one big beautiful bill this weekend if we can roll that clip.
Spending cuts. I think the cuts currently in the bill are wimpy and anemic, but I still would support the bill, even with wimpy and anemic cuts, if they weren't going to explode the debt. The problem is the math doesn't add up. They're going to explode the debt by, the House says $4 trillion. The Senate's actually been talking about exploding the debt $5 trillion. This year in September, when our fiscal year ends, the deficit will be about $2.2 trillion. Now, people used to always say, the Republicans would say, well, that's Bidenomics, that's Biden spending levels. When March, every Republican, virtually every Republican other than me, voted to continue the Biden spending levels, which are going to give us a $2.2 trillion deficit. Now, if you increase the debt ceiling $4 to $5 trillion, that means they're planning on $2 trillion this year and more than $2 trillion next year. That's just not conservative. So I've told them if they strip out the debt ceiling, I'll consider, even with the imperfections, voting for the rest of the bill. But I can't vote to raise the debt ceiling $5 trillion. There's got to be someone left in Washington who thinks debt is wrong and deficits are wrong and wants to go in the other direction. The idea that we're going to explode deficits, and the projections are now looking at over $3 trillion in deficits over the next 10 years, I think is just...
Congressman, I listened to that, and then I listened to Ron Johnson, senator from Minnesota. Or Wisconsin, I think. And he basically said, look, I don't even want to be here. Serving in the United States Senate is not the end all and be all to me. If I go back home, I'll be perfectly fine. Ergo, Trump is not going to bully me, twist my arm, or cajole me into voting for this bill, period. And he said that. What do you think?
Well, let me say, first of all, there's some things that are very, very important that Rand Paul and others have said. Is basically we're at a critical point where, once again, you can have 4 great years of President Trump, and I'm a big fan of President Trump's. But at the same time, next presidency, you'll have automatic cuts in Social Security, Medicare, and your budget, which continues to bloom, and this is where we get really concerned, where you'll next year have around 3.8 trillion in deficit spending. Realize that our entire budget is around 7 trillion right now, and it's getting bigger. So when does it stop? And Rand Paul is a true conservative, and he's not going to be bullied. None of these guys are going to be bullied. But I tell you what, I took a huge pay cut to be the most unpopular man I've ever been. I used to be a popular guy, people like Marines, people like doctors. Then you get into Congress and half of the United States hates you instantly. And that doesn't even count the divisiveness inside of your primary political party. So I think they're on to something when they say, if not now, when? If we're not going to address the deficit spending in a realistic way, then when are we ever going to do it? This is our last chance, quite frankly. We just got downgraded for the second time by Moody's on our currency. We're about to lose our standard in the world as the world standard of currency. In other words, it used to be gold. That went away in, I think, 72 in Bretton Woods, and it replaced it with the United States because we had the strongest economy. If we continue this woeful spending, we're in trouble. Now, I think that we can get them on board, and the nice thing is they have the leverage because you have about 4 super conservative senators that can twist arms and say, we don't need SALT. SALT is, for those who don't understand what SALT is, it's basically saying for the liberal states like California and New York that have the highest tax rates, they can deduct more of their taxes and not pay those taxes than their federal taxes, which means we make up for it. New York used to pay more than they actually got. Now they're paying $1 for every $1.06 that they receive back in federal tax spending. When the federal government used to only make up for 1/3 of all spending for government, now is 2/3 of all spending, where you have some states that we pay 90% of the bill for their Medicaid, when Medicaid was meant to be an entirely state-run program for health care. It's a safety net. That is why we're in the position we're in right now, is because states have to balance their budget, but the federal government doesn't. So we just keep on printing it, and it's going to crush our future generations. It's going to crush our economy. And if it doesn't come this presidency, it will definitely come the next presidency. And I don't care if it's a Republican or a Democrat, you will not be able to deal with it. So I think it's a good thing to have this sort of accountability, that we don't just pass something willy-nilly and say, it's okay, it's the best we can get. No, we can do better. And I think it's about time that we get some senators and some backbone that are going to actually do better than we did in Congress and actually shape our future so we can actually get a hold of this before it becomes something that we can never dig our way out of.
So the margin in the Senate is as narrow as it is in the House, basically. Can the bill pass if Rand Paul and Ron Johnson, and I think there's one other senator who said that they're not going to vote for it as is? What happens? How do you get to? How does the reconciliation process work? And will they be able to come to the middle and get a bill passed?
Well, let's start with SALT, right? So let's say the senators, we have no senators in California or New York. Why would we want the SALT, which adds $385 billion to our debt next year alone? Why would we want to strip it out? There you go. Now you're already down instead of $415 billion. You just stripped out 385 instantly. Now get rid of some of the IRA provisions. Once again, conservative things. Why would any Republican be against that? If we could get back to deficit neutral for the first time in a very, very long time, that's a win. Even though it's still too much, we're still building deficit spending. At least get back to let those senators have their effect. Let them get what they want. Let's pass it back to the House and do the things that we didn't do right in the House, and we can pass it. I love the fact that they have some leverage. You and I, as ultra-conservatives, as people who want to see the future of this nation secured, want to have that accountability piece. I kind of look at myself as like the last samurai. When I voted against the last CR in December, I think there was, 32 of us that voted, maybe 34 that voted against it. 100% of all Democrats voted for it. Why? Because it's a bad bill. Continuing spending at Democratic levels during the Biden administration, during the Pelosi spending levels, and we're still spending those. 40% of our FEMA emergency funds went to COVID this last year. Are you kidding me? It's time to have accountability. So I'm glad we're getting some accountability in the Senate. I hope we do have some changes that are significant. And the president has said loud and clear, hey, I'm actually for some of those because I think it's going to do us some good. So
I heard him say that. I was surprised, but you're right. He did say that over the weekend, and so that does give me hope that we can have some rational spending and some reforms. But do you think Nancy Pelosi is stupid?
Hell no.
No, I'm serious. I mean, do you think she is just? You think Jerry Nadler is just stupid?
No, these people are conniving. We have to realize that they will always do things and then blame us for it, and they want to win elections, and they'll use everything in the government to buy votes for it. And without the government's money, and I'm reading a book right now on the rise of Lyndon B. Johnson, just to kind of figure out.
Oh my gosh! Don't ruin my. I hadn't had breakfast yet. Don't get me started on him.
But he was Machiavellian, and he he masterfully used government spending to buy votes, and that's what they do. That's what they do, and we have to be smart to not underestimate our enemies and realize that these people are not dumb. They're very conniving. They're liars. They're dishonest, and sometimes they're just plain stupid. And I don't want to call anybody stupid by name, but some of them just aren't educated in economics and in reality, and so they lie to themselves as well as the people.
There is undoubtedly a contingency of people like that in Congress, no question, and in any institution, public or private. There's always incompetence, ineptness. And so Congress is not immune from that either. But the point that I'm making is I don't think Nancy Pelosi is stupid. I don't think Hakeem Jeffries is stupid. I don't think Jerry Nadler is stupid. So why would you want to literally bankrupt the greatest country in the history of mankind? And that is exactly the road that we're on, because this level of government deficit spending is not sustainable. Right now, interest on the federal debt surpasses the Defense Department budget. It is the largest single line item in the federal budget. There will come a point that we will not be able to pay the interest on the debt. And who has the majority of the United States debt? China. This is dangerous.
Actually, here's what's interesting. China, very connivingly, has divested from foreign investment in America because they're trying to accelerate that process where the interest rates goes up on our borrowing, and we have to pay more. So they actually used to be our number one. Now it's actually Japan, because China's divesting $300 billion from their investment in our debt because they want to see our economy crumble. They see themselves as not just a peer, but they want to be ahead of us, and they're doing a lot of things to make that happen. Now they have some disadvantages. Their population is shrinking. Their realty market is crumbling. They've overspent on a lot of things overseas, but they have a huge advantage because their Federal Reserve, and we all have some sort of banking system, is owned by them. So when they pay interest, they're paying interest to themselves. Our Federal Reserve is privatized. First of all, it's neither federal nor is it reserve. And if it goes bankrupt, we'll be the ones that bail them out, not vice versa. So I'm not a big fan of the Federal Reserve in general. There's a really good book called The Creature from Jekyll Island. I highly recommend people read it because, first of all, it'll make you mad. Then it'll scare you to see how much power these people have by running up our debt. And they've always had a reason. In the past, it was wars. And then the guy predicted that would be climate change because, of course, you got to spend extra money to save the world from climate change. But he never understood the power of fear when it came to COVID and how fast we ramped up the spending, which we have never stepped back on. And if you look at the difference between World War II, when we ramped up and then we ramped back down, we never ramped back after the 2008 housing crisis. We never ramped back after the COVID crisis. And that's why we're on this trajectory. We're addicted to government spending, which we just print off with the modern monetary theory mindset. And Democrats believe that we can just keep on printing money and the bill will never come to pay.
Well, the chickens are going to come home to roost at some point, and I hope it's after I've left this earth. I have a great life. I'm not in a hurry to go anywhere, but I'm just telling you, I really am worried about this, and mainly for my children and my granddaughter and soon to be grandson. And this country has been so good to me and my family. And I mean, it's the greatest social experiment that's ever been conducted that I'm aware of in the history of man. And Benjamin Franklin said, "We've given you a republic if you can keep it." And I think he had the foresight to know that in a republic, you can buy votes. And at some point, there will become a tipping point and it will cause you to lose the republic. And that's what I fear. And that's why I cannot get inside of the head of these people that I've been talking about, who I don't think are dumb. But don't they have children and grandchildren? And don't they want to preserve this great nation? And do they really want to put it at risk for their own greed and lust for power? I just don't know.
Well, I think a balanced budget amendment would be a big step in the right direction. Yesterday, I was speaking to a large crowd on Memorial Day, and it occurred to me, every other country loses their own, military folks and stuff like that. So what's the difference between us and every other nation that's had heroes and warriors that believe in their country, dying for their country? And the biggest difference I can think of is that when we go, by and large, with a voluntary military force, even during World War II, people were volunteering. Professional sports people volunteering for something that's not because we have a dictator, not because we have a monarch, not because we have a theocracy, not even because we have a president, but because they believe in the power of the people that are actually stronger than a government, that this government was created for one purpose and one purpose only, to defend our rights, not to lord over us, not to regulate us, not to tax us, not to make sure that we do the right thing, but to make sure that they protect our life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness as God has given us, and no country can take away from us. And that is the difference between our sacrifice as warriors for those great people that I wear one on my wrist right now. Kevin Shea, who died 20 years ago in Iraq, and he died with that idea that this country is not about any politician, not about any leadership, not about any government. It's about the individual, the ultimate minority that we represent and protect. And that's what this is all about. And the only way you preserve that is making sure that the government doesn't put us in a situation where we'll never be able to bail ourselves out, and our children will always be indebted to a socialist government because that's the only way you can survive at that point. And nobody will borrow our money anymore. So
that is so well said, Congressman. And you captured the sentiment that I've been sensing. And I thought about this yesterday. Where did you celebrate Memorial Day?
I was in Alpharetta at a memorial with a bunch of veterans and just good patriots. I was just so moved. The taps playing, just the reflection on what it really means, and to see people, young people too, show up hundreds and hundreds of people just to pay their respects. And God bless them, because that's last night we had a drink for a couple of buddies that died on the rugby team that we played for in the Marines. 40 people are gone since 9/11 that I played rugby with in the Marine Corps. That's a daunting thought.
That is a significant data
They love
point.
their country.
Well, and that's the sense that I had yesterday when I was watching President Trump, Vice President Vance, Secretary Hegseth, and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs at Arlington Cemetery. In this country, when we want to celebrate, we remember and celebrate the people that have paid the ultimate price for our freedom. When you watch the celebration in Russia or in China, what do they celebrate? The tanks and the missiles driving down the main road in the capital. It is a much different culture and a much different value system. And I think you touched on it in what you just said, and that's worth saving. That's something very special in the world today. And I am so grateful to you for your service to our country on more than one battlefield, as well as all the people. My brother was very successful in his career. He retired at age 50, and he went into the Air Force Reserves, and he served for a total of 35 years. And sadly, I just went to Washington, D.C. a couple of months ago to attend his interment at Arlington Cemetery. And if our listeners have not had the opportunity to go to Arlington, I really encourage you to do so. It is overwhelming when you see the 450,000 graves of fallen servicemen and women, and people like my brother, who did not serve in combat, but received a full military burial in Arlington with an honor guard and a band and a 21-gun salute overlooking the Washington Monument. It really does put you in touch with the sacrifices that have gone into making this country great. And it just fills my heart with appreciation and patriotism for our country. And Benjamin Franklin was right. If we can keep it, and it is worth preserving. It is worth every member of our society working to keep this country great. Thank you, Congressman Rich McCormick from Georgia. You are so nice and generous with your time. Thank you so much. And you've given us great insights. And I really appreciate your comments on the budget and hope that we're successful in getting a good bill done.
Well, it's my honor. Great to be with you. God bless everybody who's listening. Semper Fidelis.